The bell over the diner door gave a soft, almost apologetic chime as Gavin Carter stepped inside, guiding the wheelchair that carried his daughter. Warm air drifted toward them, carrying the smell of coffee that had been brewing for hours, the sweetness of fresh pie cooling on the counter, the faint tang of bacon still lingering from the dinner rush. It was nothing like the places Gavin was used to. No polished floors, no uniformed wait staff with scripted greetings, no low jazz humming through concealed speakers. The walls here were dressed in faded photographs of baseball teams and old calendars from local feed stores. The booths were patched, vinyl cracked at the seams, and the light above the counter flickered with a nervous buzz. Gavin's tailored coat looked out of place, like something that belonged on another street, another life. But tonight wasn't about him. Tonight was about Lily. She sat small in her chair, wrapped in a pale pink coat, her head tilted toward her chest. A thin braid curved across her shoulder, her fingers twitching against the fabric of her dress in restless repetition. She did not look up when the hostess approached. She did not take in the noise of the clinking plates or the laughter from a family the booths away. She was simply there, as she always was, locked in a silence that felt heavier than any boardroom deal Gavin had ever brokered. He had stood before rooms of powerful men and moved them with words, bent companies to his will with contracts and signatures. But here, in the presence of his own daughter, he felt like a man who had lost the language of the world. Table for two, the hostess asked with a polite smile. Something quiet, Gavin replied, his voice firm, leaving little room for chatter. She nodded and led them to a booth tucked at the back, away from the bustle. Gavin helped position Lily's chair beside the table and slid across from her, unfolding a menu more out of habit than interest. His eyes rarely strayed from his daughter. "Are you hungry?" he asked gently, the words careful, like a man approaching fragile glass. No reply. There never was. She kept her gaze fixed somewhere invisible, somewhere far away. Gavin let the menu fall shut and pressed the bridge of his nose while Waitress approached, notepad in hand. She was young, with strands of chestnut hair slipping loose from a messy bun. A dusting of flour clung to her sleeve, as if she had been sneaking help in the kitchen. Her name tag read Vanessa. Her hazel eyes, warm yet sharp with awareness, swept over Gavin, then settled on Lily with a flicker of curiosity not edged with pity. "What can I get started for you?" she asked in a tone that carried no rehearsed cheer, only a steady calm. "Grilled chicken," Gavin said. He hesitated before adding, "and for my daughter, something soft. Soup, maybe. We've got homemade chicken noodle." Gentle on the stomach, Vanessa offered. He nodded once. She scribbled and disappeared, leaving Gavin to his silence. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through emails, though he absorbed nothing. His thoughts circled the same question: would Lily eat tonight? Or would he leave once again with untouched food and a heavier heart? Minutes later, Vanessa returned, placing a steaming bowl before Lily and a plate of chicken in front of Gavin. "Let me know if you need anything," she said before retreating. Gavin picked up the spoon. "All right, sweetheart," he murmured, his voice lowered as though coaxing a fragile bird. He scooped a small portion and guided it toward her lips. But before it reached her, Lily's hand jerked, knocking the spoon away. Broth splashed across the table, droplets staining the white cloth. The clatter of metal drew the eyes of nearby diners. Gavin's jaw tightened. He rising to his face, not anger at her, never at her, but anger at himself, at his inability to bridge the endless gulf between them. He steadied his breath and tried again. "Softer now, Lily, please." But she did not lift her gaze. Her small fingers tightened on her dress, her body folding deeper into herself. He felt that familiar wall of helplessness closing in, the weight of every failed attempt pressing down on him. And then, quietly, someone moved beside him. He turned his head and found Vanessa crouching at Lily's side, her apron brushing the floor. Her eyes met his, steady and calm. "May I?" she asked, nodding toward the spoon resting against the plate. Gavin blinked, caught off guard. Normally, he would have dismissed such an offer. Lily wasn't a spectacle, wasn't to be handled like a charity case. He had hired the best therapists, specialists, experts who spoke in acronyms and clinical tones. None had broken through, but something in Vanessa's expression held no pity, no performance, only a quiet certainty. For a long breath, Gavin weighed pride against possibility. Then, wordlessly, he handed her the spoon. The spoon felt heavier than it should have in Gavin's hand, as though it carried not just broth, but the weight of surrender. For a man who had built his empire on control, Giving it up even in this small way felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. He placed the utensil in Vanessa's waiting palm, watching the way her fingers curled around it with steady confidence. She did not hesitate, did not fumble, and perhaps that was what unnerved him most. Vanessa lowered herself so her eyes were level with Lily's. She didn't rush. She didn't speak. She simply waited, her presence quiet but undeniable. Lily, who had ignored therapists, who had recoiled from nurses, shifted slightly in her chair as though sensing something different. The diner noise faded into the background, the clink of plates, the low hum of conversation until all that existed in Gavin's world was this young woman kneeling beside his silent daughter. "Hey there, sweetheart," Vanessa whispered, her voice almost a secret meant only for Lily. "This is just for you. No hurry." She lifted the spoon slowly, carefully, as though timing her movements with Lily's shallow breaths. Gavin's chest tightened. He expected the same reaction, the sudden flinch, the hand batting the spoon away, the wall slamming back into place. But Lily didn't move. Her fingers twitched, her head tilted a fraction, her lips parting the smallest degree. It was so slight Gavin thought he might have imagined it. But then, deliberate, fragile Lily leaned forward and took the spoonful of soup into her mouth. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the family taboos away seemed to pause mid-conversation. Gavin's heart slammed against his ribs. He had fed his daughter before, of course, but only through battles of tears and refusals. Through desperation that left him hollow. Never like this. Never with quiet consent. Vanessa didn't smile triumphantly, didn't even glance at Gavin. She simply waited again, spoon poised, patience radiating from her. Lily swallowed an action so ordinary for most children, but for Gavin, it felt like watching the sun rise after years of darkness. A second spoonful followed, then a third dive. By the time Vanessa set the spoon down, Gavin's throat burned, his eyes stung, and he realized his hands were trembling. He didn't know whether to thank her or to demand answers. Instead, he leaned back in the booth, suddenly aware of the sweat beating at his temples. Vanessa stood, brushing her apron, finally meeting his gaze. "Sometimes it's not about the food," she said softly. "It's about trust." And with that, she moved away to tend to another table as though nothing monumental had just happened. But Gavin could not move past it. He stared at Lily, who now sat calmer, her hands resting loosely against her lap. For the first time in years, she didn't look like a prisoner trapped inside herself. Something had shifted. Something had cracked open. A storm churned in Gavin's chest: gratitude, confusion, anger at himself. Who was this waitress? This stranger who had done in minutes what an army of experts had failed to achieve. He watched her as she refilled coffee for a trucker at the counter, as she laughed at a joke from a group of teenagers, as though she hadn't just shattered the walls of his carefully controlled life, and then, as he sat in that booth with untouched chicken cooling on the plate before him, Gavin Carter, the man who could crush competitors with a single phone call, realized, with a jolt of unease, that for the first time in years, the future no longer felt predictable. It felt dangerous. It felt alive. When Vanessa returned to check on them, Gavin's voice was lower, heavier. "How did you do that?" he asked, his words more accusation than question. Vanessa blinked at him, her hazel eyes steady. "I just listened," she said. Most people tried hard, but Gavin wasn't convinced. No, there was something else here, something she wasn't saying. And as he looked down at Lily, who gave the faintest hum as though echoing life back into the air, Gavin knew one thing with absolute certainty. He could not walk away from this diner and pretend tonight had never happened, because a door had been opened, and behind it lay truths he was not yet ready for but could no longer avoid. The drive home that night was a blur of headlights and silence. Gavin's hand tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles pale, his gaze darting from the dark road ahead to the rearview mirror, where Lily sat quiet in her wheelchair, restrained. She was calm, unusually so, her fingers resting against her lap instead of pulling at her dress. He should have felt relief, maybe even joy, but instead his chest roiled with something heavier. He had watched Vanessa do in minutes what he had failed to accomplish in 6 long years. That kind of thing didn't happen by chance. It couldn't. Sleep didn't come easily. He lay awake in his penthouse, the skyline glowing faintly beyond the glass windows. But all he could see was the diner's dim lights and Vanessa kneeling beside Lily. Her eyes hadn't been filled with pity, nor the clinical detachment he was used to. They had been steady, knowing. He hated that he needed answers, that a waitress from a forgotten diner had unsettled his world. The next evening he found himself back at the diner, though he told himself it was coincidence. He told himself he needed something ordinary, a break from glass towers and boardrooms. But when Vanessa approached their table again, notepad in hand, he felt the light collapse inside him. She looked surprised to see him, though her professional smile never faltered. "Back again?" she asked, though her eyes lingered on Lily, as if measuring something. "Yes," Gavin replied shortly. His voice clipped. He ordered the same grilled chicken. For Lily, he left the choice to Vanessa, though the words tasted strange on his tongue. Giving over decisions, even small ones, was foreign territory. This time, Vanessa didn't crouch beside Lily right away. She moved with an ease that suggested she knew exactly how long to wait, exactly when to step in. Gavin studied her every move. The way she bent slightly at Lily's level before offering a spoon. The way her tone dropped into a low, calming register. The way she never rushed. And again, impossibly, Lily accepted. Suspense pressed down on Gavin like a weight. It wasn't just luck. He was certain of it now. But what was it? He watched Vanessa with narrowed eyes, questions piling against the dam of his control. When she walked away, he leaned across the table, searching Lily's face. "What is it about her?" he whispered, though he knew his daughter wouldn't answer. Still, for a fleeting second, he thought he saw Lily's lips curve, not into a smile exactly, but something close. His breath caught by the third visit. Gavin no longer pretended it was coincidence. He was chasing something, hope, answers, maybe both. He noticed how the other wait staff deferred to Vanessa, how customers seemed to linger near her section as if pulled by gravity. She wasn't loud, wasn't flashy, but there was something about her that commanded trust. When Gavin finally confronted her, it wasn't planned. It happened after Lily had eaten half a bowl of soup under her careful guidance. Vanessa was clearing the table when he spoke. "Where did you learn that?" His voice was low, edged with suspicion. "Learn what?" she asked, eyes flicking to him, cautious. "The way you are with her. My daughter hasn't responded like that to anyone. Not to specialists, not to caregivers. And then you." He broke off, anger and awe tangled in his chest. "You make it look effortless. Why?" For a moment Vanessa's mask slipped. Her hand stilled on the tray. The air between them tightened, heavy with unsaid words. Gavin saw something flicker in her eyes, pain, memory, grief, but then it was gone. Hidden behind the calm surface she always wore. "Sometimes you don't need training," she said finally. "Sometimes you just need to have lived it." And then she turned, walking toward the kitchen before he could demand more. That night, Gavin sat awake again, the city quiet around him. Her words gnawing at him. Lived it. What had she lived? What scars did she carry that gave her the key to his daughter's silence? The thought unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. By the fourth night, the suspense that pulled him back to the diner was unbearable. He wasn't a man who chased mysteries, he solved them. Yet here he was, standing outside a small-town diner in a $1,000 suit, feeling like a beggar at the gates of a truth he couldn't touch. Inside, Vanessa moved with the same quiet grace, but Gavin noticed details now. The tired slump of her shoulders when she thought no one was watching. The faint dark circles under her eyes. The way she kept her hands busy, as though stilling them would let grief surface. Something was there. Something powerful. And Gavin Carter, man who owned half the skyline, realized with a chill that the answers he was desperate for might not just change Lily's life. They might change his. Asterisk rain slicked the streets the night Gavin decided he could no longer tolerate silence. The city pulsed beyond his windows, headlights blurring against glass. But his thoughts were fixed on the diner, on Vanessa's unfinished words. "Sometimes you just need to have lived it." The phrase gnawed at him like an open wound. He had built his life on clarity, on knowing numbers, strategies, outcomes. He couldn't abide mysteries. Yet here was a woman whose truth had pried open a door in Lily's quiet world, and she had slipped away before explaining why. The following evening, Gavin brought Lily back, though he told himself it was for dinner. He told himself it was routine, that Lily had responded well, and consistency was important. But when Vanessa appeared with that same quiet presence, balancing a tray as though the weight of it were nothing, he knew his reasons were lies. Lily's eyes flickered toward her before the food even touched the table. Gavin caught it, a subtle shift, a recognition. He leaned forward, voice taut. "She knows you." Vanessa's brows lifted. "Children remember kindness," she said softly, kneeling again by Lily's side. But Gavin wasn't satisfied. He watched as she coaxed Lily into eating, every spoonful delivered with infinite patience, every pause calibrated to Lily's rhythm. His daughter responded with a calmness he hadn't seen in years. By the time the bowl was half empty, Gavin couldn't hold back. "Tell me," he said, his voice low but heavy with command. "What happened to you? Why can you reach her when no one else can?" Vanessa's spoon paused in midair. For a long moment, she didn't move. The diner around them bustled with ordinary life orders shouted from the kitchen. The bell above the door chiming as a couple walked in, but at their table, silence stretched taut, a string ready to snap off finally. Vanessa set the spoon down and sat back on her heels. Her hazel eyes were steady, but her hands trembled faintly as they rested against her apron. "I had a brother," she said, her voice barely audible over the clatter of dishes. "His name was Daniel. He was 5 years younger than me, born with a condition that left him trapped inside himself. Doctors gave my parents pamphlets, schedules, specialists who charged more than they could afford. None of it worked. He stayed silent, shut away." Her gaze dropped to Lily, who stared at her with unnerving stillness, as though she somehow understood. "I was 13 when I learned that if I sat beside him, just sat, without rushing, without filling the air with words, sometimes he would move. A finger twitch, a glance, a sound. Tiny things, but they were miracles. I carried him to school on my back when my parents gave up. I fed him when he refused everyone else. And for a while, it worked. I thought maybe love could be enough." Her throat tightened. "But Daniel got sick. Pneumonia. His body couldn't fight it. He died when he was 9. Gavin's breath caught. He hadn't expected this, hadn't expected to feel her grief slam into him like a physical force. Vanessa exhaled shakily, brushing at her sleeve. "I never forgot the way he would look at me in those moments. The way he trusted me when he trusted no one else." I see that same look in Lily's eyes. Lily shifted in her chair then, her small hand brushing against Vanessa's wrist. The contact was fleeting, almost imperceptible, but Gavin saw it. His chest tightened as if someone had gripped his heart. Lily hadn't initiated touch with anyone in years. Not with him, not with the therapists, but with this woman, this stranger. Emotion swelled hot and unmanageable. Gavin looked away, blinking hard. The weight of his own failures pressed heavy. For all his money, all his resources, he had not been able to break through. And here was a waitress from a roadside diner, carrying the ghost of her brother, managing what he could not. But alongside the shame came something else, fear. If Vanessa could reach Lily in ways he could not, what did that mean for him? Was he losing his daughter to the memory of someone else's grief? He straightened, his voice harsher than he intended. "Why are you here, then? Why not do something else? Work with children, with families. Why spend your life in a diner?" Vanessa's eyes flashed with something fierce, though her tone remained calm. "Because people like me don't get invited into those spaces. Degrees, titles, licenses, that's what they want. I had none of that. Only experience, only pain. So I took the jobs I could find. And if fate puts me in front of someone like Lily, then I do what I know." The words struck him like blows. For the first time, Gavin saw beyond the flour-stained apron, beyond the tired bun and the steady hazel eyes. He saw a survivor, a woman carrying loss like an invisible weight, yet turning it into a gift. Lily let out a sound, then soft, almost a hum. Gavin's head snapped toward her, breath shallow. Vanessa froze, eyes widening. It wasn't a word, but it was more than silence. It was possibility. The diner seemed to exhale around them, the moment passing unnoticed by others, but carved forever into Gavin's heart. As they left that night, rain still drizzling against the dark pavement, Gavin couldn't shake Vanessa's words. "I had a brother. He trusted me when he trusted no one else, for the first time in years." Gavin Carter didn't fear losing a deal, or an empire, or even his reputation. He feared losing something he hadn't known he was looking for. The woman who held the key to his daughter's fragile, locked-away world. Asterisk, the days that followed were unlike anything Gavin had known before. Meetings blurred into background noise, phone calls dragged on without meaning, and contracts that once thrilled him felt like paper stacked against the enormity of what he had witnessed. Each night, without fail, he found himself driving Lily back to the diner as though pulled by a force he couldn't fight. It became their ritual. The bell above the door chimed. Vanessa looked up with tired eyes that softened at the sight of Lily, and for a few fleeting hours Gavin's empire shrank to the size of a booth tucked into the corner of a humble diner. He told himself it was for Lily that her progress depended on consistency. But he knew better. It was also for him, because for the first time since his wife's death, hope had crept into his life. Yet hope was dangerous. It made you vulnerable. And Gavin Carter didn't do vulnerable. On their 6th visit, something shifted. The diner was quieter than usual, the storm outside rattling windows and keeping most regulars at home. The lights flickered every now and then, casting shadows that stretched across the linoleum floor. Gavin sat across from Lily, watching Vanessa kneel beside her as she always did, spooning broth with infinite patience. "Good girl," Vanessa murmured, waiting for Lily to take the next bite. Her voice was steady, warm, as though the storm outside couldn't touch them. Gavin leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes locked on his daughter. "She's responding faster," he observed, his tone more analytical than odd. But inside, something swelled: fear, wonder, maybe both. Vanessa nodded but didn't look at him. Her focus was entirely on Lily. She trusts this. She trusts the quiet. And then it happened. A sound. Small, fragile, like the first crack of ice before the thaw. Gavin froze, not breathing. Lily's lips moved, shaping a sound, the faintest vibration slipping into the air. It was not clear, not polished, but it was a word. D. Daddy. The spoon clattered from Vanessa's hand into the bowl, broth rippling. Gavin's chest caved, his heart hammering so loudly it drowned out the storm outside. He stared at Lily, wide-eyed, unable to believe what he had heard. For 6 years, not once had she spoken his name. Not once had she let the word cross her lips. "Say it again," he whispered, voice breaking. "Please, say it again." But Lily only blinked, her small hand twitching as she reached toward the space between them. Gavin caught it in both of his, clutching her fingers as though anchoring himself to reality. Tears burned his eyes, unbidden and uncontrollable. He, who had once been called ruthless in the boardroom, who had signed billion-dollar contracts without a flicker of emotion, now wept openly in a corner booth of a roadside diner. Vanessa sat very still, her hazel eyes glistening, watching the miracle unfold. She didn't interrupt, didn't comfort, didn't claim credit. She simply let the moment belong to them, but Gavin's mind churned beneath the emotion. Questions clawed at him even as tears streamed down his face. Why now? Why her? Was it chance, or had fate decided to send this waitress into their lives for a reason? When he finally found his voice, it was ragged, raw. "You don't understand," he said to Vanessa, though his gaze never left Lily. "I begged. I've prayed. I've hired every expert, flown across the world, signed away fortunes to people who promised breakthroughs. And yet," his throat tightened, "and yet it was you." Vanessa shook her head gently. "It wasn't me. It was her. She's been waiting for the right moment." But Gavin wasn't convinced. The storm inside him grew louder than the one outside. He had lived his life believing everything could be bought, solved, conquered with the right deal. And now, for the first time, he was faced with something he couldn't quantify. When they left the diner that night, Lily asleep in her chair, Gavin paused at the door, his silhouette framed against the flicker of neon lights. He looked back at Vanessa, who was wiping down a table, shoulders bent beneath the weight of invisible burdens. She looked so ordinary, so unremarkable to the rest of the world. But to him, she had just shaken the very foundations of his life. As he stepped into the storm, Gavin knew two things. His world would never be the same, and he could no longer keep her at arm's length. He needed to know everything: who she really was, what she carried, why his daughter had spoken her first word in her presence. And beneath the crack of thunder, another realization took root in his chest. The fear wasn't just about losing control anymore. It was about losing her. The storm that had rumbled in the distance all week finally broke on the 7th night. The city lay beneath sheets of rain, the kind that blurred the skyline into shadows and beat against windshields with relentless force. Gavin nearly turned back as he guided his car through flooded streets, but Lily sat quiet in the back, her head tilted against the seat cushion, her braid damp from the sprint into the garage. She hadn't spoken again since that night in the diner, but the single word "daddy" echoed in his mind like a bell that could never be unheard. He was terrified to lose that fragile progress, terrified it had been a fluke. By the time they pushed through the diner doors, both Gavin and Lily were soaked. The bell overhead chimed against the wind, and Vanessa looked up from behind the counter, hair plastered against her cheek where the bun had come loose. Her eyes widened slightly at their appearance. "You shouldn't be out in this weather," she said, concern coloring her voice. "I couldn't stay away," Gavin admitted before he could stop himself. His voice was softer than he intended, almost pleading. Vanessa studied him for a moment, as though weighing the truth of his words, then nodded and motioned them to the corner booth. The diner was nearly empty, just a trucker sipping coffee and an older couple sharing pie. The storm rattled the windows, and the power flickered, plunging the room into momentary darkness before buzzing back to life. Gavin wheeled Lily into place, every clap of thunder sharpening the tension in his chest. Vanessa set a bowl of soup before Lily, kneeling as always. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice pitched low against the howl of wind. "It's just us tonight. No rush." But Lily didn't move. Her fingers twitched, then curled tightly around the hem of her dress. Gavin leaned forward, dread flooding him. "She's shutting down," he muttered. "She does this when she's overwhelmed." Vanessa stayed calm. "Storms can be loud for her. Let's just wait." But waiting wasn't enough this time. Without warning, Lily's small body stiffened. Her lips parted soundlessly, eyes rolling back as her chest hitched. Gavin's blood ran cold. "She's not breathing," he choked, his chair scraping violently against the floor as he surged to his feet. "God, she's not." Panic froze him. For all his power, all his preparation, he was useless in that moment. His mind spiraled with the same helplessness he had felt the day his wife died. The day the hospital monitors went flat and nothing he said or paid for could change it. His hands hovered, trembling, unable to act. Vanessa didn't hesitate. She was already moving, sliding Lily gently from the chair onto her lap, tilting her small head back with practiced hands. "Gavin, focus," she barked, her calm stripped away, urgency in its place. "I need a clean cloth now." He stumbled toward the counter, knocking the chair aside, grabbing the first thing he saw. His vision blurred as he shoved the towel into Vanessa's hand. She worked with a precision that stunned him, clearing Lily's airway, pressing gently against her sternum. Each second stretched into eternity, Gavin's heart thundering louder than the storm outside. "Come on, Lily," Vanessa urged, voice fierce. "Breathe for me," and then a gasp. Small, ragged, but real. Lily's chest rose, then fell again, air rasping back into her lungs. The sound was the most beautiful Gavin had ever heard. He sank to his knees on the floor beside them, his hands clutching the table leg for balance. Tears streaming unchecked, Vanessa held Lily close, her cheek pressed against the child's damp hair. Relief washed over her features, but Gavin caught the flicker of something else there, too old grief. The memory of her brother in his final moments. For a heartbeat, he saw her carrying not just Lily, but the ghost of a child she had once tried to save. When Lily's breathing steadied, Vanessa looked up at Gavin. Her voice shook, though her hands remained steady. "You froze." He couldn't argue. He had frozen. He had been powerless. And the truth cut deeper than any boardroom defeat. "I didn't know what to do," he whispered, shame burning in his chest. Vanessa's gaze softened. "That's why I'm here," she said. The storm raged outside, but inside the diner, something broke open between them. Gavin reached for Lily's small hand, wrapping it in his own trembling grasp. "I can't lose her," he said hoarsely. "I can't." "You won't," Vanessa replied, conviction ringing in her words. Asterisk, but as the lights flickered again and the storm pressed against the diner walls, Gavin realized he wasn't just afraid of losing Lily, he was afraid of losing her. Because in that moment, drenched in rain and fear and fragile relief, Gavin Carter, the man who had built empires, finally admitted to himself that this waitress carried the only kind of power that truly mattered. The storm finally broke in the early hours of morning, but the storm inside Gavin Carter hadn't eased. Long after he carried Lily home from the diner, her breathing steady, her small body curled against him as if trusting him for the first time in years. His mind refused to rest. He paced the length of his penthouse, glass walls revealing the city glistening with rain. Deals waited on his desk, messages buzzed unanswered on his phone. But nothing could compete with the image of Vanessa kneeling on the diner floor, holding his daughter, keeping her alive when he could not die by dawn. Gavin made a decision. He wouldn't just wait for chance encounters at the diner anymore. He needed answers. He needed her. That evening, he returned earlier than usual. The diner was busier now, a Friday night crowd filling booths with chatter and clinking glasses. Vanessa moved swiftly between tables, her hair pinned more neatly tonight, her smile worn but practiced. To everyone else, she was just a waitress. To Gavin, she was the woman who had pulled his daughter back from the edge. He waited until the rush thinned before approaching her at the counter. "We need to talk," he said, voice low, carrying more command than request. Vanessa's eyes flicked toward Lily, who sat at their booth tracing patterns on the table with her fingers. "About her? About everything," Gavin replied. For a long moment, she hesitated. Then she untied her apron, handed it to the cook, and motioned him toward the door. Outside, the air was cool, the streets damp from the storm. They stood beneath a flickering street lamp, the world narrowed to just the two of them. "You want the truth?" Vanessa asked, her hazel eyes sharp in the dim light. "I need it," Gavin said, his jaw tight. "I can't understand how a stranger can reach my daughter when I've failed for years." Vanessa's laugh was brittle, humorless. "I'm no miracle worker, Gavin. I'm barely holding myself together." Confusion furrowed his brow. "What do you mean?" Her shoulders slumped. "You think I'm just a waitress who happens to be good with kids. But the truth is I don't even have a place of my own. I'm 2 months behind on rent. My landlord's already threatened eviction. The only reason I picked up this job is because it lets me eat while I work. I walk home at night because I can't afford bus fare half the time." She exhaled shakily, hugging her arms around herself. "You see me as strong, but I'm drowning, Gavin. I just hide it well." The revelation hit him harder than he expected. He had imagined her as grounded, unshakable, the kind of person who had chosen simplicity. Instead, he saw a woman carrying the weight of survival every single day, and still giving what little strength she had left to his daughter. "I don't understand," Gavin said quietly. "Why help us, then? Why pour yourself into Lily when you have nothing to spare?" Vanessa's eyes softened, though tears glimmered in them. "Because I couldn't save my brother. But maybe I can make a difference for her. And if that's all I ever get to give this world, then it's enough." For a moment, the city noise faded. Gavin stared at her, his chest tight, shame and admiration warring inside him. He had lived his life surrounded by wealth. Yet here was a woman with nothing who had given his daughter everything. Then, as if to punctuate the moment, a small sound drifted from behind him. Gavin turned sharply. Lily had wheeled herself closer, her small hands gripping the chair's rims. She looked between Vanessa and Gavin, and for the second time in her life, she spoke, "Mama." The word was faint, fragile, but it pierced through Gavin's soul like a blade. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth, tears spilling freely. Gavin staggered a step, his knees threatening to buckle. For years, he had believed his daughter's world was locked forever. And now, in one breath, she had opened it not for him, but for the woman who had walked into their lives by chance. Gavin dropped to his knees beside Lily, clutching her hand. "Sweetheart," he whispered, his voice breaking. You said." He looked up at Vanessa, his face wet with tears he didn't try to hide. "Do you understand what this means? She's choosing you." Vanessa shook her head, sobbing softly. "No, Gavin, she's choosing trust. She's choosing love." But Gavin knew better. He saw it in Lily's eyes, in the way her hand reached toward Vanessa, not away. He saw the truth he had spent years denying. Money could buy treatment, caregivers, even the illusion of progress. But it couldn't buy what his daughter needed most. Connection, presence, love given without measure. Standing in the glow of the street lamp, Gavin made his choice. "Come with us," he said, his voice steady now. "Not as an employee, not as a caregiver, as part of us. You've already changed her life. And mine." Vanessa's tears slowed, shock rippling across her face. "Gavin, I built empires," he interrupted. "But none of it matters if I can't build a life for her. For us. Let me give you what you deserve. Let me give Lily what she's been waiting for." The silence between them stretched, heavy and fragile, until Lily broke it once more with a soft hum, her tiny hand still reaching toward Vanessa Dodd and under the broken street lamp. With the storm washed away and the city beginning to breathe again, Gavin Carter, once a man defined by power and control, surrendered to the only truth that mattered. His daughter had spoken, and in that single word, she had chosen their future. Vanessa stepped forward, tears glistening, and took Lily's hand. For the first time, Gavin felt the hollow ache inside him begin to fill. This was not business. This was not strategy. This was life. And for the first time, he was ready to live it.